Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that diversity in our courts is a very important factor, and we see once again a very diverse group of nominees, and I thank President Biden for that, because experiential background, racial diversity, I think, is very much needed on our courts. To ensure the fitness to serve of all of the nominees, I ask the following two initial questions of all nominees who come before any of the committees on which I sit. So I'll start with asking these two questions of each of you, and we'll just go right down the line, starting with Judge Belkin-Green. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors?
No.
Or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, I have not.
No, Senator, I have not.
No, Senator, I have not.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Second question, have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, I have not.
No, I have not.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
I would also like to note that the so-called doctrine of originalism is certainly not anything that I would request of any of our judicial nominees. My assumption is that, and what I look for in our nominees is an ability to be fair and objective, and as district court judges, that you will apply the precedent of the Supreme Court. I'll start with a question for Judge Kirsch. You have participated in several panels on prison reentry, and I think you focus on juveniles. I think that's a really important aspect of the criminal justice system, that the reentry of our prisoners into our communities. And I understand that, as you noted, you also initiated a statewide juvenile reentry program. The Board of Prisons ran a halfway house, which closed in 2019 in Hawaii, and I've been trying to reopen this federal halfway house to enable prisoners leaving our federal prisons some ability to re-enter in a more successful way. How important do you think it is for halfway houses to exist within our prison system?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the question, Senator. I think halfway houses in any aspect to seg an individual from a custodial location and reintegrate them into society is critical and may be dispositive in terms of one's success. And obviously, it's a policy-making decision on how to allocate resources. But in my experience, fronting money up front might save an awful lot of recidivism down the road and help reintegrate folks back into their families and their communities to be productive individuals. So I think it's critically important.
Do any of the other nominees have any experience or have any thoughts about the importance of a reentry program? Anybody else want to add to what the judge just noted? Okay. For Mr. Farbias, yes, like the chairman, I note that you come from a background where your parents were immigrants and who truly came here with nothing. Can you just talk a little bit more about how much that experience really informed your life or career choices?
Senator, thank you for that question. I was privileged to grow up in a house where all four of my grandparents were alive and had grown up speaking different languages than English. I grew up in a household where my grandparents, there were four of them, three of them didn't know how to drive a car, and one was a New York City taxi driver. It was a wonderful and exciting place to be a child. And what I would say is, I remember that, and I carry it with me. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if I could itemize all the different ways it's influenced my life, but it's part of what's driven me to public service.
I think that kind of a life experience really informs you what you want to do with your life, and I certainly can relate to that because I grew up here with English is not my first language, So I want to thank all of the panelists and nominees, because I think you will all make very excellent judges. Congratulations to each of you. Aloha.
In the nick of, sorry, my mistake.
Oh.
Senator Hirono.
I've had
joined
two
us.
chances.
This is not a three-strike situation.
Mr. Chairman, I ask the following two foundational questions of every witness who comes before any of the committees on which I sit, so I will ask you these questions as a part of my responsibility to ensure the fitness of nominees to take the positions to which they have been nominated. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, I have not, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, I have not, Senator.
Although I arrived late to this hearing, and I apologize for that, but I had a conflict. You've been asked, I think, by a number of my colleagues to explain what happened in the case in which you represented the school. And so that I am clear, in terms of the question of anonymity of the survivor in this instance, perhaps you could explain why, on the one hand, it is important to protect the name of a minor in cases like this, and what the countervailing arguments are for how you proceeded.
Thank you for the question, Senator. The importance of anonymity is multifaceted. First, using the name of a sexual assault victim has the potential to both either physically place that victim in danger or potentially result in serious psychological harm. There are also considerations that take into effect whether others similarly situated might not feel comfortable using the court system for fear that their names would be used. Those are considerations of paramount importance to the court. If there are other considerations that are balanced to address the second part of your question, the importance of a fair and impartial trial in court is essential. And there's also the need at the jury phase of a case to ensure that witnesses who are testifying feel comfortable about how they're addressing the jurors. But the First Circuit precedent in this case, Senator, that was just adopted in 2022, makes clear that sexual assault victims are an exceptional case, that they should be allowed to proceed anonymously, that if they cannot proceed anonymously, they should have a right at the beginning of the case under the collateral order doctrine to appeal that to the First Circuit Court. If confirmed, that is the precedent I would be obliged to follow, and I would follow it.
That was not the existing precedent at the time of this case.
That had not been the precedent at the time of the case, Senator, which is why we addressed to the federal court in New Hampshire some recent authority from the District of Columbia that the school believed was supporting its position.
So you are going to be on an appellate court, and generally in an appellate situation, you do not see any of the parties that were involved in the district court. And so in every case, however, especially even in criminal cases, there are real people whose real lives are impacted by what the appellate court, what the appellate judge does, and often for these litigants, it's the worst day of their lives to go to court. So how would you, as a judge, keep the real people behind every case in mind as an appellate court judge?
Thank you, Senator. As a homicide prosecutor, I went into court all the time with victims of horrific violence, oftentimes sexual violence. And I know from those experiences just how important the interaction between a judge on the bench and a victim of crime is. It requires careful listening. It requires an understanding and background in how trauma affects individuals that have been harmed by sexual violence. And so I believe that those experiences in my past have given me an opportunity to see so many judges who interact with victims of crime, assure that their voices are heard and taken into consideration as a judge impartially and fairly ensures that all litigants to any case have an opportunity to be heard and that justice is done based on the application of the facts to the law.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hirono. Senator,
But I thank the chairman for giving me the extra time.
thank you, Senator Kennedy. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to acknowledge the fact that President Biden has nominated some of the most diverse nominees, highly qualified nominees to all of our courts, and diversity and inclusion is really critical. And I see, at least in two of our nominees this morning, that they are not far from the immigrant experience, which I think is a very critical part of inclusion and diversity on our courts. And again, as the only immigrant serving in the U.S. Senate, I think I have many life experiences that are common to our two nominees. And to all of our nominees, thank you very much for your willingness to continue public service. I'd say that when we ask questions such as the import of Plessy, Dred Scott, Korematsu, these are decisions that are fine examples of how the Supreme Court gets it really, really wrong. And I would say some of the court's decisions now will fit into that category, and it may not take that long for history to make that judgment. I asked the following two initial questions to ascertain the fitness to serve of every nominee who comes before any of my committees that I sit on. So I will ask each of you those two questions, and we'll start with Judge Ali Khan. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Judge Oliver, I really appreciate the fact that you talk with students about citizenship. I think that is something that we, all of us, should be focusing on, especially, and talking about, especially as I believe that the ability for people to vote, which is a basic and fundamental right of citizenship and responsibility, I believe there are too many states that are really limiting our right to vote. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk to our young people and encourage them to be aware of public service. So in your responsibility committee on judicial ethics, why are judicial ethics and judicial integrity important to our justice system?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think the short answer is when the people are aware that the judges whom they come before are governed by a rule of ethics, they have more faith that the judges police themselves, and that when there's a situation where a judge's impartiality might reasonably be questioned, that judge would step aside. So it restores and continues, bless you, Senator, restores and continues faith in the criminal justice system by the litigants who come before us.
Thank you. I completely agree with you. Judge Ali Khan, you have spent thousands of hours on pro bono work. Can you just tell us why the pro bono work has been so important to you?
Thank you, Senator. There are so many litigants in this country that don't have the benefit of representation. Obviously, we have enshrined a right to counsel in criminal cases, but there are many civil cases, collateral proceedings, where there's not a constitutional or statutory right to counsel. And I think as lawyers, we owe an ethical duty to our legal community to represent those that cannot afford representation, both because it, I think, helps advance the interests of those individual litigants, but it also serves the court. I have been fortunate to be appointed by both the Third Circuit and the Sixth Circuit to handle cases where they felt that the use of counsel would be helpful.
Thank you. Judge DeClercq, the fact that you have a very unique background, to say the least, has being an immigrant been one of the reasons that you wanted to become a lawyer? And does it inform the, how you approach decision-making as a judge?
Yes, I'm very proud of being an immigrant. It is a more unusual immigrant experience in that I was brought to the United States as an infant and adopted by my family. But I've always been very aware of how different my life would have been had that not happened, and the incredible opportunities that this country has given to me. And so I've spent most of my professional career in public service. I deeply appreciate not only the country, but the government, which was why I joined the Department of Justice. And for me, it's always been about equality and justice, and I think that that is part of the immigrant experience.
Yes. I think you are another example of immigrants coming to this country to create a better life, but the appreciation we have for a country that afforded us opportunities we never would have otherwise had. I just want to mention, Mr. Chairman, for Judge Munley, it must be an incredibly meaningful experience for you to be sitting here to be on the court that your father served.
Thank you, Senator. It truly is an honor. He taught me about what it is to be a good judge. He served as such an example to me of what it means about judicial temperament, and I consider that one of the most important attributes for a judge.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. And now, Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To ensure the fitness of all nominees who appear before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following two initial questions, which I will ask each of the panel, each of the nominees, and we'll start with Mr. Edwards. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards, as an assistant U.S. attorney, you were an attorney in lawsuits successfully requiring local schools to desegregate and bring in more minority students and faculty. What is the importance of these desegregation orders to the community, and how do they advance our nation's ongoing commitment to equality?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I, as chief of our civil division in the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Western District of Louisiana, I assisted my colleagues here in Washington with the ongoing consent decree matters pending in our district. And I can say that all of those cases worked toward ensuring that past vestiges of de jure discrimination were being remedied.
Thank you for that, because I do think that we still face issues relating to racial discrimination and equality in our country. That is for certain. You also served as chair of the Louisiana Judiciary Committee, receiving complaints against state judicial officers. So you evaluated the character and fitness of candidates for the state bar, among other things. So why are judicial ethics and judicial integrity important to the justice system?
Senator, judicial ethics is very important to public confidence in the judicial system. In courts, generally, someone is going to be disappointed in the outcome of a case, but judicial ethics, if properly followed, can ensure that everyone has confidence in the process that they went through to reach that outcome?
I think I am relating to the fact that our Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics. I won't put you on the spot with that one, but there are some of us here who consider that very important. For Judge Maddox, among your speaking engagements, you served as a presiding judge in naturalization ceremonies for new Americans. And these are important civic events that bring together communities and our country's newest citizens. What did it mean to you to participate in the naturalization ceremonies, and what lessons did you learn when you presided over these ceremonies?
Oh, thank you for that question, Senator. I can say that my experience presiding at naturalization ceremonies may be among the most gratifying experiences that I've had as a judge. Never as a judge do you get an opportunity to see so many smiling faces in the same place, and everybody walk in happy and everybody walk out happy, where nobody loses. But more importantly, the lesson that I draw from each of those events is the vast range of experiences that bring the people in that room to that room. And they meet in the same place, but they come from literally all over the world. And there must be something that they hold in common that brings them there. And what they hold in common becomes evident in the course of that ceremony. They've picked this country out of anywhere else in the world to live out the rest of their lives. So there's something special about this country that brings everyone into that room from all over the world. And to be reminded of that, and the gravity of that, I think is humbling as a judge, and it's a lesson that I take with me in my work throughout my caseload.
We often refer to our country as a country of immigrants, except for the Native peoples who were here long before the white people came. So yes, I think it is really important that the naturalization ceremonies, which I have also participated in, both as a naturalized citizen but also as a member of Congress, have been very, very touching to see all these people who come to our country with the promise that our country holds for a better life for themselves and their families. And that is very, very obvious. And, you know, there are tears and, as you say, a lot of smiles. Thank you very much for your participation in these very important ceremonies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hirono. Senator Hawley?
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Padilla. Senator Hirono?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to each of you on your nominations. I ask the following two questions of all nominees for any of the committees on which I sit. So I will ask each of you, and we'll start with Judge Bryan in responding. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No.
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 Judge Bryan, I must say that presiding over 8,000 cases and 100 or 120 trials, that is impressive, and to be reversed only 9 times. Now, I note that you testified that you apply precedent faithfully and objectively in deciding your cases. I think you said that.
Yes.
That's commendable. And Ms. Lee, you have been questioned by some of my colleagues about things you have written, and ostensibly maybe those things reflect your views on certain things, but would you agree with Judge Bryan that the way you've been a judge for 5 years now, is that correct?
That's right.
And that you too apply the law faithfully and objectively in
Yes,
deciding?
Yes, Senator. It's one of the things I take very seriously, and similarly in terms of the reversal rate, which I've had, which is only less than 3, I've tried to do and reflect, I think, as well. Reflects in my record as well.
Regarding your writing that talked about how transgender persons, immigrants, and racial minorities are treated in prison, I can agree with you that, and with Judge Bryan, that these are, I would say, marginalized groups, and basically you and I in particular, you and I are part of the marginalized groups. We know how people can be treated in a way that is highly discriminatory. So I can only envision that in a prison setting, that becomes even more, it can become even more pronounced in terms of discrimination. So you have an understanding of those kinds of environments. Thank you very much for that. Now, both you and Judge Bryan have talked about how important mentoring is. Can you just explain, describe a little bit more about someone whose mentoring meant so much to you, Judge Lee?
There have been multiple people. I've been very fortunate, both in terms of the district court judge who I had mentioned, Jerome Turner, and as I'd mentioned earlier, we were very different people coming from different backgrounds, but he embedded me a fundamental respect and was very rigorous about it in terms of the rule of law and the value of precedence. We might disagree about a lot of things, but we always agreed about the law. And in terms of doing that, I've held that rigor in terms of my analysis as a judge now, making sure that I'm following binding precedent otherwise and applying it. And then for the Ninth Circuit, I would say Judge Turner always told me to go back to the community, and I've tried to do so. I mean, Judge Ferguson has always told me to go back, and I've tried to do so.
One of the things that you wrote about is the barriers facing formerly incarcerated people upon reentry, and how important it is to provide them avenues where they can reenter the community. And recently, the only federal halfway house in my state of Hawaii was closed, and this reentry facility was vital to our community, and I have been fighting to reopen this facility in order to provide these important services. Could you tell us briefly more about the importance of having a reentry program for decreasing recidivism and reintegrating formerly incarcerated people who, by the way, most incarcerated people do get back into the community? Why are these reentry programs so important?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I think, as you mentioned, at the time when that piece was written and discussing, it was a relatively new issue and one which I was not as familiar with. Later on, when I was at Hastings, making sure that people knew service to be provided, making sure that they knew the remedies which they would have is something I focused on later on while I was at UC Hastings. And across the board, it's important that for public safety that we go back and make sure that people can be reintegrated within society. And so I had done some of that work when I was at UC Hastings.
I would say that every federal prison program should have a reentry kind of program. Mr. Chairman, may I just make one comment regarding Ms. Robinson? She has not been getting very many questions, but you went into how important diversity is in the IP area, and completely agree with you, because we know that women and minorities are not very much represented in terms of people who get patents and all of that. So I would expect that you will do everything you can to have women and minorities be very much a part of a system that really means innovation and leadership in our country.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. I want to apologize to the nominees and their families and friends that I have to step out. There's a roll call vote. Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations to each of you. To ensure the fitness of nominees before any of the committees on which I sit, I ask the following two initial questions. So we will just go right down the line, starting with Judge Kasabai. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator. No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement relating to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator. No, Senator.
For Judge Park, you spent the majority of your career working in the Office of the Public Defender for Hawaii. Public defenders play a vital role in the justice system by ensuring that all defendants, regardless of means, have their constitutional rights to counsel. Can you speak briefly to the importance of having strong prosecutors and defense attorneys in our adversarial justice system?
Thank you, Senator. The Sixth Amendment requires that there is a right to counsel, and the reason why that is so that there can be a balance of power with respect to these cases. Individuals who are charged with an offense are simply charged. The government has the burden of proof, and to prove that charge beyond a reasonable doubt. And it is necessary to have attorneys represent these individuals in order to hold the government to that high burden of proof that is required under the law. And so that is something that I did for 20 years. And I find that the right to counsel pursuant to the Sixth Amendment is vital in order to have a fair and just legal system.
For both you and Mr. Smith, parents can have a profound impact on our lives. Mr. Smith, your father immigrated to this country from Honduras. After completing seminary, he worked his way through college as a janitor and went on to earn a doctorate and become a professor. Judge Park, your father spent a long career on the Honolulu Police Force, rising to the rank of major and serving as president of the Police Officers Union. For both of you, how have your parents' experiences impacted your lives and your careers? And this includes your mother's, although I just mentioned your father's. Go ahead, Judge Park.
I had the honor of witnessing my father work hard as a Honolulu police officer. His example of public service is what drives me to this day. Growing up, I used to paddle canoe and didn't want to catch the bus home after being wet for so long, and would go to the Honolulu Police Department and sit until my father was ready to come home. But he was so dedicated to his job and doing the investigations that he did inspired me. And so he was vital to my decision to enter into the law. And my mom's support of him throughout his legal career was critical. My dad would not have been able to do the level of police work that he did without her love and support.
And he would agree with that.
And he would agree with that.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Senator. When you're fortunate, as Judge Park and I were, to have the kinds of parents we did, your parents help you see what's possible. Just watching their life stories, the things that they were able to do from where they started and where they ended up, makes it possible for their children to think the same thing. And I know that my siblings and I all feel that way. Since my father was already discussed a little bit, let me say just a few things about my mother. My mother became a Head Start teacher, a substitute teacher in public school. I remember having her in one of my classes at least once. And as a kid, that's always embarrassing. In the summers, she would sometimes work shifts at Kmart to help pay the bills. And I think when you see parents just dedicating themselves to helping their families do well, it teaches you those values.
In the brief time that I have left, again for both of you, Judge Park and Mr. Smith, Judge Park, you would be the first Native Hawaiian woman to serve in the federal district court. Mr. Smith, your father, as I said, is an immigrant from Honduras, and your mother is of Japanese ancestry. In my view, the judiciary should reflect the diversity of our nation, and both of you reflect the vibrant diversity of Hawaii. Could you just very briefly talk about why diversity is so important, as I assume it is important to each of you?
I think diversity is important, both personal and professional diversity on the bench, because a diverse bench represents the community that it serves. And when you have a diverse bench, it builds and brings integrity to the institution. And so I think it is very important.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Senator. I think diversity in its broadest sense is very important. And I do agree with Judge Park that when the community sees that the bench, in all positions of public importance, are open to everyone from all sorts of walks of life, backgrounds, perspectives, it promotes and ensures trust in those institutions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Hirono. Senator Kennedy? Senator Hirono?
Mr. Chairman, congratulations to each of you. I asked the following two foundational questions of nominees to for any of the committees on which I sit. So I'll start with Ms. Hill and go right down the line. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Ms. Hill, you have a long career working for the Cherokee Nation, most recently as Attorney General, so I think that you will bring a unique perspective to the federal bench. How has your experience working for the Cherokee Nation prepared you for an appointment to the federal bench?
One of the good things about working for the Cherokee Nation, one of the things I have most enjoyed was the opportunity to work with lots of different types of people, working with state leaders on issues of common concern, working with the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District to prosecute crime in Indian Country. So I've had an opportunity to work with lots of different types of individuals while working for the Cherokee Nation. It is the largest federally recognized Indian tribe and we have a very large reservation. So it's created lots of opportunities for me to learn to work with different people and to learn this state very well and to learn the law of lots of different topics, from laying pipelines and fossil fuels right up to criminal jurisdictional matters in Indian Country. So it's given me a breadth of experience that I think is going to be useful to a district judge in the Northern District of Oklahoma.
I agree with you, and if confirmed, you'll be the first Native American woman to serve as a federal judge in Oklahoma. And this committee has had a hearing in which we are, I think, sending to the floor. I hope, yes, we are. The first Native Hawaiian woman to sit on the federal bench. So I think it's very important that we have judges who have the kind of perspective that has to do with our Native people. So, I certainly look forward to supporting you. Again, for you, in, McGirt v. Oklahoma, the Supreme Court held that the state of Oklahoma lacked jurisdiction to prosecute Native Americans for crimes committed on tribal land. Can you tell the committee briefly about the process of setting up the Cherokee Nation's criminal division following that Supreme Court decision?
When that case was decided, the Cherokee Nation's criminal docket was pretty uneventful. We typically had about 100 cases a year that we would hear, because most of the more serious crimes were tried by the Northern District or the Eastern District. Post-McGirt, that completely changed. The jurisdictional rules applied throughout the reservation. So we had, I think, around 3,700 matters, criminal and traffic matters, filed that first year post-McGirt. So I had to go from one criminal prosecutor to 9 full-time criminal prosecutors, and that sort of ramping up included support staff, investigators, all of those things that were required. So that process of building that up very quickly was something that I had to oversee as Attorney General, and it was quite the effort. But it was, that's what the law required. The nation's jurisdiction was larger than had previously been understood until the opinion in McGirt v. Oklahoma.
Thank you. Judge Maglona, since 2011, you have served as the sole active federal district court judge in the Northern Mariana Islands, and as such, you perform the work of a chief judge, a magistrate judge, and a bankruptcy judge. You wear many hats. Can you tell us about the unique experience of being not only the chief judge, but also the only federal judge in a district, and how has this experience informed your judicial approach?
Senator, it's been a wonderful challenge to be able to do all 3 areas of law. I'll be candid, the bankruptcy docket is not very vibrant right now. But there were instances where we'd have to do some novel issues. And as I mentioned, I also sit in by designation in Guam. So I assist in that district, and that's where I've also had additional experience even privileging over bankruptcy cases. Given the broad general jurisdiction experience that I had in the trial court for 8 years, I think it really prepared me to be able to do everything from beginning to end as magistrate judges for criminal or civil matters of criminal, from warrants all the way to sentencing as a district judge. So I had that full experience, and I enjoy the full panoply, and I am so rewarded when I am also work with other district judges from either my neighboring district in Guam or elsewhere, including Hawaii.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And while I didn't have a question for you, Mr. Russell, I look forward to supporting you also.
Thank you, Senator. Senator
Thank you.
Grassley?
Yeah. Ms. Hill, I'm going to start with you. The 4 years, you were for 4 years until recently Attorney General, as we all know now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to say that those questions relating to Hamas, et cetera, they're rather mystifying. This is not the Foreign Relations Committee, but be that as it may. I asked the following initial questions of all nominees on any of the committees on which I sit, so I will ask these 2 questions of our panel. And by the way, welcome to each of you, and congratulations on your nominations. So, since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature? Judge Keel, let's start with you, and we just go down the line.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
I have not, Senator.
No, Senator.
No, Senator.
I have a short question for Mr. Fanzoni. You mentioned that that the best practices for OLC, you noted 3 things: frank and independent advice. I think your second was that this advice would be discussed, thoroughly vetted, and then the third is that the advice would be made public. So are these 3 aspects, best practices, being followed by OLC right now?
Senator, it's my understanding, and based on conversations I've had with the prior leader of OLC, that they do follow these best practices now.
Do you know when they started following these best practices?
I think they've been best practices for some time, and obviously they're ideals, and there may be times when people think that they don't, but I think the goal is always to follow those best practices.
That would be good, because I would not think that the torture memo was one that was the best kind of legal advice. Question for Judge Keel. I want to welcome your mother, because where is she, by the way? Can you wave? Hi. 안녕하세요. So you noted that her naturalization papers are in your office?
They're hanging with my father's naturalization certificate at the entrance to my chambers.
Aren't you also naturalized?
I was naturalized, but through my parents' naturalization. I was too young at the time.
Oh, okay. So you don't have a naturalization document hanging?
I do have a naturalization. Okay. I don't believe it's called a certificate. It's some other document that I have. It has my picture on it when I was a very young child.
Well, I can relate to that, because I have my naturalization document hanging in my office too. So it is a very important experience. Yes. To not come to this country speaking any English or any of that. And to see you here, it's a proud moment for your family. Ms. Russell, you spent some time at the beginning of your career working in the Office of the Public Defender. And public defenders play a vital role in the justice system, as my colleague Peter Welch always notes, that is a really important experience for people who are going to be judges. So can you speak to the importance of having strong prosecutors and defense attorneys in our adversarial justice system?
So, Senator, I did have the opportunity following my clerkships to work at the Office of the Federal Public Defender in Connecticut. It was a great opportunity to learn my way around federal court, often appearing in different proceedings before the court and representing clients. And I do think it's an important role in our system. So there's the Sixth Amendment guarantee of the right to counsel to everyone in the country, regardless of the nature of the offense. So serving that seeing that constitutional obligation carried out through the work of the office was rewarding, and I think gave me experience that would be helpful in a transition to a new role as a judge, where I'm so fortunate to be confirmed.
I note in your background that you've led or are leading a number of clinical programs at your law school. So is there a high percentage of the students at your law school who sign up for these clinical programs?
There are. Quinnipiac has a great experiential program, so we have most of our students taking either a clinic or an externship, and this is a great opportunity for the students to learn while they're in law school and go into practice already knowing some of the skills they need to know.
I have to say that the clinical program that I was in was one of my best experiences at the law school. For Judge Keel, can you talk a little bit about the importance of diversity on our bench?
Yes, Senator. Diversity, from my perspective, works two ways. First is the outward view of the court. It instills confidence in our judiciary when the public sees faces like theirs within the judiciary. I think that also instills confidence in the public that there's other people, judges that have had those life experiences as well. I think it also works inward because we have a very small number of people in chambers. I've been very fortunate to have a very diverse group of law clerks, interns, and staff members. We have great discussions and hearing different viewpoints and hearing different lived experiences certainly, I believe, helps me to be a better judge.
I agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Hirono. Before recognizing Senator Kennedy, I want to acknowledge Judge McCasey's arrival. We're glad to have you back in the room. And Professor French has already told us about your travails in arriving here, but thank you very much for coming.